Their leverage is they're the only thing that's keeping the American economy up right now. Why do you think Donald Trump lifted all the oil sanctions against the Russians yesterday?
Oh, I didn't know he did that. Why did he do that?
Because no oil's leaving the Middle East right now. And so you need oil to come in on the market. So Donald Trump lifted all oil sanctions, and Vladimir Putin's economic problems have been solved. And as an American, I think it's good for our country to finally realize that we can no longer sustain this, the global hegemony that we've been doing so ignorantly for the last several decades, and that we need to right size who we are globally. We need to become good neighbors, not bullies. So this is the hope. It might be a pipe dream. People might accuse me of picking up a mushroom and eating one that I shouldn't have eaten or something like that. But I'm actually not as depressed as I was yesterday, because I had sort of one of these what do they call that moment when you have an epiphany?
They have a light bulb moment.
I had a light bulb. I had a Peter. I was Peter in the Damascus desert, and the light went off, and I saw the light. And I actually think that the Russians are the right people at the right time for this problem set. And I just see a lot of maturity there, a lot of pragmatism, a lot of realism, and they're just positioned to actually help end both the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict in Iran. It may take a couple weeks, but I think that we are in such big trouble right now that I don't think Donald Trump realizes just how big a trouble he is. But once he does, Kirill Dmitriev is meeting with Witkoff right now in Miami. A week ago, Kirill Dmitriev had everybody hated him. They accused him of traitor. He was a traitor. He's betraying. How dare you work with? But because Putin didn't fire him, because everybody's questioning why does Putin still have Kirill Dmitriev, and why doesn't he fire him? Because you keep the diplomacy door open. And now at this moment, Dmitriev's meeting with Witkoff because they're trying to cut a deal that involves bringing an end to the conflict in Ukraine and an end to the conflict in Iran. And I'm trusting that this is going to lead us in a good direction, not because Donald Trump's clever, because Vladimir Putin is clever.
So who is the negotiator that Putin has negotiating with Witkoff? What's his name? I haven't heard this name.
Kirill Dmitriev. He's a former Goldman Sachs banker. I mean, he's a Russian, but he's American trained. And he knows capitalism very well. He runs a Russian national investment fund. But he's a guy that when Steve Witkoff first went over, Putin needed somebody who spoke Witkoff's language. You don't take Sergei Lavrov and have him sit down with Steve Witkoff, because Witkoff doesn't speak diplomacy and Lavrov doesn't speak banker. So you brought in Kirill Dmitriev, and they both spoke the same language. They hit it off well. They get along good. And he's the guy that helped make Alaska happen. And now he might be the guy that helps bring an end to these wars. I was very down on Kirill Dmitriev last week. If you had talked to me about him last week, I wasn't going to say too much positive. But this week, I've just seen the Russians do things that just show absolute maturity. It shows patience. It shows the pragmatism. And now Dmitriev's in Miami meeting with Witkoff, and that's a good thing if you want peace. Trump had taken some pretty hardline stances on Ukraine that he's no longer in a position to hold on to. He needs Russia's help in Iran. And so the Russians are going to say, we go back to the Alaska formula updated with the most recent information. You have to get the Ukrainians to do this. And in exchange for that, we'll get the Iranians to moderate their demands. But I think, the United States is going to have to leave the Middle East. I mean, that's one of the things. It's just a guarantee. We're not staying there. The Iranians are going to make the same argument that Russia's always made, that you can't end this war without solving the root cause of the conflict, because that's what the Russians have said. You can't end the Ukraine conflict and leave unresolved the root causes of the conflict, why we had this conflict. Because if you end it without solving those, we'll just have a conflict in 5 years. So Russia's saying, when this thing ends, it's over, finished. And the Iranians are going to be saying the same thing. When this thing ends, it's over, it's finished. And the only way it can be over and finished is America's got to leave the Middle East. And I think there's a grand bargain to be had out there. This allows Donald Trump to call himself the greatest peacemaker in the history of all all time because he's going to end two wars and he could take credit for it and want to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And then he'll also tell the American people that I've ended the permanent Middle East conflict. I got the American troops out of the Middle East. Now, smart people know that he got his ass kicked and had to retreat. But, to the true believers, there's a deal here in the making. Who knows how it's going to be finalized, but there's something in the works right now. Dmitriev's meeting with Witkoff. This is a huge thing that's happening. Witkoff is both the Middle East negotiator, the one who was negotiating with the Iranians, and he's the guy who negotiated with Putin and Dmitriev. So the fact that Dmitriev's meeting with the guy responsible for managing both of the big problems that Trump has right now means that there's a solution being worked out that links both of these problems together. And the only way it can be over and finished is America's got to leave the Middle East. And I think there's a grand bargain to be had out there. This allows Donald Trump to call himself the greatest peacemaker in the history of all time because he's going to end two wars and he could take credit for it and want to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And then he'll also tell the American people that I've ended the permanent Middle East conflict. I got the American troops out of the Middle East. Now, smart people know that he got his ass kicked and had to retreat. But, to the true believers, there's a deal here in the making. Who knows how it's going to be finalized, but there's something in the works right now. Dmitriev's meeting with Witkoff. This is a huge thing that's happening. Witkoff is both the Middle East negotiator, the one who was negotiating with the Iranians, and he's the guy who negotiated with Putin and Dmitriev. So the fact that Dmitriev's meeting with the guy responsible for managing both of the big problems that Trump has right now means that there's a solution being worked out that links both of these problems together.
So just let me make sure I'm following what you're saying. So you're saying that since the oil from the Gulf has been stopped because Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, so all that oil that usually goes to India, usually goes to China, usually goes to Japan, other places, is not getting there. And now, so Trump sees that this could have a devastating effect on the world economy. And so he decides to lift the sanctions that he had against countries buying Russian oil.